Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. Thank you all for stopping by the show today. As you can see by the title of this show, it's actually my 18th birthday, so just throwing that out there. I guess technically, legally, it's my first show as an adult, so how about that? But before I get into any sports, let me just go ahead and say, I don't like, making anything like about me or anything of that nature. But I do want to say this. About 45 minutes ago or so, maybe an hour ago, 45 minutes ago, something like that, I was invited onto a live featuring my man, All Even Podcast, Barry Grant Jr. He comments on the show all the time. He's been on the show multiple times, as has Ryan Flowers from Clutch Sports Talk. He also was there. And I was under the impression we're just going to talk briefly because obviously I had to hop off. I got a show to do. We were going to talk about the Clippers being down 3-1 and the whole bit. Both Ryan and Barry are diehard Laker fans and do not like the Clippers. So I was down for that. But they really got me in there to wish me happy birthday. So just want to say big shout out to both of those guys. Apparently, I found out from Barry that my mom actually set this up. So shout out to mom, shout out to dad. Definitely the best birthday present I've received today. So thanks to everybody involved. And here we go. We got a show to do. Talking about Khris Middleton dropping 38 points on the Atlanta Hawks last night. Going to lead the show off with that in regards to both the Bucks situation and the Hawks, as well as the Clippers being down 3-1. You're not going to want to miss my take on Game 4 and the rest of the outcome of this series. I'm going to save that for a little later. Also, Kawhi Leonard, sticking with the Clippers, is reportedly unhappy with the medical staff. I have a very strong reaction to that. And I'll put it this way. It's not a criticism of the Clippers. I'll say that for later on in the show. And apparently, Damian Lillard, according to Chris Haynes, may ask for a trade out of Portland. Not very surprising news if it does come to fruition. I'm going to talk about that later. And Scottie Pippen is going crazy right now, guys. He has lost his mind. He's got a book come out in the fall, and I don't know what he's talking about, but gonna leave that be until the end of the show. But I'll start with Bucks, Hawks last night, Game 3, Eastern Conference Finals, series tied 1-1. Milwaukee got the job done, won Game 3. They're up 2 games to win the series. Giannis, what's in the message? He had a Giannis game. And I will say this. I came on this show after Game 2 of the previous series when the Bucks were down 2-0 and just got it handed to them by the Brooklyn Nets. And I crushed Giannis. I criticized Middleton. I criticized Drew Holiday. I crushed Giannis. Because I'm like, dude, you are a 2-time MVP. Brooklyn's great. They're not that much better. They're not a 39-point blowout better than you. They're just not. And so, I came on the show and I'm like, come on, man, you're a 2-time MVP. This can't be happening. This cannot be happening. You cannot be getting exposed. MVPs should not get exposed. Since then, Giannis has been great. Now, the end of Game 5 of that series drove me crazy. Shooting a fadeaway over James Harden. I mean, I don't even have to get into it, but he was not good in the last 2 minutes of Game 5 when KD by himself, basically, James Harden was awful, Kyrie was out, dropped 49 points on the Bucks' head. But since then, Giannis has been excellent. He really has. And I will have to say this. I put him into that Russell Westbrook category of, not being aware of your circumstances, not being aware of what you got to do when it really matters in playoff games. Outside of Game 5, he's done everything he's needed to do. Game 7, when I thought all the pressure was on Giannis, if I had to put all the pressure on one individual player, I put it over Giannis above KD. Why? Well, KD had 2 rings already. Obviously, he hadn't won a championship and still hasn't won a championship, not with the Golden State Warriors. But I'm still like, come on, it's Kevin Durant. In my view, I said this on Friday's show, on Thursday's show. Best overall scorer ever. Best overall scorer ever. As let's see, I have a comment from Barry Grant Jr. Shouts to him. He said, "Happy birthday, my guy." Thank you, man. He says, "I completely agree with Giannis. He has stepped up huge. He has. I mean, last night, obviously, once again, awful from the free throw line. You got the road crowd. This is going to happen the rest of the playoffs if the Bucks, win this series and advance to the finals. He's going to be hearing this on the road. He's going to be hearing the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 about that fast too. They're counting a little too fast. But his free throw routine takes forever. But his free throw shooting has once again been horrible. But yet and still, 13 for 21 for the field, 33 points, 11 rebounds. That is a Giannis Antetokounmpo style game. That's about what you expect from him, because that's what he gives you in the regular season. So he's got to give you that in the playoffs. And thus far, especially since game 2 against the Brooklyn Nets in the last series, he stepped up. And someone else who stepped up is Khris Middleton. Now, Khris has been a guy, I sounded a little bit like I don't want to say a hater, but I was pretty rough on Khris Middleton last year. And not necessarily him, but the Bucks. Let me explain. Bucks last year had the best record in the NBA. Best record. Again, this is the second straight year they got the best record in the NBA. For a while there, up until the season got postponed due to COVID, the Bucks had not a great chance, but a realistic chance to win 70 games. They were really good last year. And we got to the bubble, and I said it the whole regular season, and I kept saying this during the bubble. I said the Milwaukee Bucks are not going to go to the NBA Finals. Forget winning a championship, they're not going to the finals. Why? Because Giannis is great. But if Khris Middleton is your number 2, you're not a championship team. You're just not. Because Giannis isn't on the level that, say, LeBron is, where he could take a Khris Middleton, borderline all-star in the East, and say, okay, here we go, we're going to the finals. Giannis isn't on that level. Few players in the history of the game are. And so Giannis is great, and he wasn't good in the playoffs last year, to be fair. But I'm like, listen, if you got a 2-time MVP, that's great. But if Khris is your number 2, I don't really like y'all's chances. I liked Boston better. I liked Toronto more. Turns out Miami was the team that, ended their season. And so what happened? Khris, outside of one game against the Heat in the playoffs last year, was not good. He stepped up big this year. And you know what has told me the most about Khris Middleton? Is that we start this series, and he had games like this in, against Miami, and especially against Brooklyn. He was really bad the first 2 games, right, with Giannis. The first 2 games against the Nets. And he wasn't great in game 5 either. But game 6 led the Bucks in scoring. Game 7 played bad through the first 3.5 quarters and hit every big clutch shot when the Bucks needed him. That's what you got to have. That's what he's got to do in the playoffs. Now, what happens in the Eastern Conference Finals? He's bad. Inefficient, not hitting shots through the first 2 games at home. And so we got to get road game 3. It's not like a high-pressure situation. It is game 3, not game 7. But it's a game 3. You're on the road. The series is tied. And the Hawks, as they've done, it seemed like every single home game of the playoffs, they come out the gates flying, right? Trae, no pun intended, they're Hawks, right? But Trae Young's knocking down shots, on fire. Bogdanovich, Herder. Everybody seemed like in a red uniform was knocking down shots, and everybody in the blue uniform, not so much, at least through the first few minutes of the game. But what does Khris Middleton do? After struggling badly the first 2 games of the series, drops 38 points, in the entire game, and 20 in the fourth quarter. 20. And by the way, Bucks were down 7 about midway through the fourth quarter. And that's with, Trae Young with the ankle injury. And I'll get into Trae in just a second. But when he needed to step up, he did. He needed to step up, and he did. And so major shout out Khris Middleton. I'm going to take the Hawks to win game 4. I'll take the Hawks to win game 4 close, and the Bucks to win the next 2 games and win the series. I said Bucks in 6 before it started, just out of respect for Atlanta. Although I did say if Atlanta wins this series, then I'm like, okay, I'm picking the Hawks to win the championship at this point, because I bet against them the first 3 series. Not going to bet against them again. But they're in a 2-1 hole. They were in a 2-1 hole against Philadelphia. But unlike Philadelphia, people compare Ben Simmons and Giannis. Well, the difference is Giannis isn't afraid. Ben Simmons, when he shoots, looks afraid. He just doesn't take shots. Whereas Giannis, I don't like him taking a lot of threes, but he's like, no, I'm going to stay aggressive. That's what separates good players, which Ben Simmons is a good player. He is. From great players, Giannis. That's the difference. And Ben Simmons has all the capabilities of being all the the talent to be a great player. Just ain't got it up there. And so to Atlanta's side now, just mentioned they were down 2-1. to Philadelphia with a game 4 in their home floor. They were down 18 in that game and came back and won. This is a really dicey situation for the Hawks because Trae Young is balling again. He was dropped 48 on the Bucks in game 1, struggled along with every other Atlanta Hawk in game 2. And then last night, seemed like he couldn't miss. He was shooting them from the Hawks logo near half court over Giannis. I mean, he was doing the shimmy again after the threes. I mean, he was balling. And late third quarter, he takes a step to run back on defense, and he steps on the referee's foot and twists his ankle. He goes back to the locker room, gets checked out, comes back about 3-4 minutes into the fourth quarter, but never looked the same after that. Didn't have his same explosiveness, and struggled the rest of the way through, as did the Hawks. Obviously, this is a must-win game 4 on, I guess, tomorrow night on Tuesday. Tomorrow night, game 4. Hawks, Bucks. I believe that tips off at 8:30 Eastern, as every game in this series has, from the State Farm Arena. I'm not going to go ahead and say this series is over because, like I said, I bet against Atlanta time and time again. I picked the Knicks to gentlemen sweep them in round 1. Yeah, I was dead wrong. It was actually the Hawks who gentlemen swept the Knicks in round 1. In the second round, obviously everybody, including myself, picked Philly. I said, what, out of respect for Atlanta, I'll take Philly in 6. Well, obviously that wasn't the case. Hawks won in 7 in Philadelphia. And then this series, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take the Bucks in 6. I'm still standing by that. Feel very confident about it. The Hawks won't lose the next 4 games after winning game 1. I don't see that happening. I see Trae coming back from this ankle. Now he's got to have the other guys around him step up. For the most part, Gallinari was excellent last night off the bench. I feel like he should have got more minutes than he got, over Capella, because he at times he became a liability. You got to give us more than 8 points, especially with Brook Lopez struggling the way he's been struggling. John Collins, 13 points, 6 for 8 from the field. I guess you'll take that from him. Bogdanovich struggled after, getting out to the gates, flying early, but he's got to have the other guys step up around him. And what's the old saying about role players in the NBA? You usually play better at home than on the road. So this is a golden opportunity in game 4 coming up for the Hawks tomorrow night to tie this series. I think they will. I think it'll be close. I think Giannis's inability to shoot will come back to bite the Bucks tomorrow night, but I think they'll blow them out in game 5. Talking about the Bucks, I think the Bucks will blow out the Hawks in game 5, and if there is a game 6, which I think there will be, they'll get it done and advance to their first finals in, man, I don't know how many years. I know they haven't won a championship in 50 years. I don't know how long it's been since they've even been to the finals. So definitely a lot of history being made already, and a lot more to be made in these NBA playoffs. As I have a comment here from John Rivera. He says, "Happy birthday again, young man. Fan podcast." Thank you, John. I really appreciate that. Love doing the shows, the live shows on IG. Be sure to check those out, everybody. I will just say this. If the Clippers lose tonight, you may want to hop on Instagram. And check out Barry. I'll definitely be on there if they lose tonight, and John as well. Ryan Flowers may join. We'll see what happens. But if the Clippers lose, you may want to stop by IG. I'll just leave it at that. As John also says, I still got Bucks in 5. Only reason I have Atlanta in 6 is because I think that I'm most confident the rest of the series about the Hawks winning game 4 than any other game, because I'm like, they're at home. The Atlanta knows that the role players know they got to step up and help Trae, because obviously he's not 100% now with this ankle injury. They know this, and Nate McMillan knows it's a must-win game. It's not an elimination game, but if you go on 3-1, you're not coming back against this Bucks team with the size disadvantage that there is. So, I mean, it wouldn't be stunned if the Bucks 1-5, but I think Atlanta's going to win tomorrow night, and the Bucks will close out the next 2 games. But we'll see what happens. Now to the Western Conference Finals. The Wild Wild West. Game 4, like most games, made no sense. It was an eyesore. If you love basketball, it was about as hard of a game to watch as you could have had. It was rough. The Phoenix Suns won 84-80. It was, as painful to watch an NBA game as I've ever seen. I thought Milwaukee beating Brooklyn in game 3 of the second round, 86-83, I think it was. I thought that was an ugly game. That was ugly because there was a lot of physicality involved. And not that there wasn't between the Suns and Clippers in game 4, but guys couldn't buy shots. They could not throw it in the ocean, to use an old basketball term. I mean, on the Phoenix side, this is just terrible. They shot 36% from the field, 20% from 3. On the Clippers side, they shot 32.5% from the field and 16% from 3. So both teams were garbage in game 4. The Suns were just less garbage. The Clippers more. Clippers shot worse from the field and from 3, and ultimately that was the difference. Let me say this. Let me start with Phoenix. Chris Paul once again made all the big plays down the stretch for the Suns. That's what he does. Devin Booker, as didn't shock any of us, threw off the mask. He struggled badly in game 4. I think he struggled in game 3. I got tripped over my words a little bit. He struggled in game 3. I figured he'd probably ditch it in game 4 because he just didn't seem to be working well with it. We've seen a lot of players, great players, work well with the mask. LeBron has used it. Kyrie, Kobe. A lot of great players have worn a mask and seemed fine. Just seemed to really be bothering Devin Booker's rhythm. And let's just say he didn't suck. He didn't suck in game 4. 8 for 22 for the field, 0 for 5 from 3. Most of the time, that would be pretty bad. But in Saturday night's game, that was, I guess you'll take that from your best offensive player. But I will say this on the Clippers side, especially on the part of Paul George, who everybody's called Pandemic P. I was on that train 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. Kawhi Leonard's out. Probably done for the rest of the playoffs. Going to get into Kawhi in just a second after I talk about this series. But no Kawhi Leonard. Rest of the playoffs for the Clippers. And I'm going to... let me just start with Paul George first before I get into my main idea. Paul George, once again, wasn't there. Couldn't hit free throws down the stretch. Couldn't hit shots. I will say some of the Phoenix defense was pretty good. But if you're Paul George and you say, well, you look at his numbers, you say, well, he had 23 points, 16 rebounds, and 6 assists. Well, of course he was going to get 16 rebounds. Nobody could buy a shot. I'm looking here at DeAndre Ayton. He had 22 rebounds. Of course. By the way, Ayton was excellent. 19 points, 22 rebounds. He was just excellent for the Suns, and he's been excellent this entire playoffs. Actually, DeAndre Ayton won Defensive Player of the Year before the season started. So, but he's been great defensively. Rim runner. He's been great. He's been great on the boards, and he's emerging into one of the great young players in the game. As John has another comment, he says he was forcing a lot of shots. Talking about Paul George. Yep, he was. He was forcing shots. We've normally seen him make those at least since Game 5 against the Jazz. He was making a lot of contested shots. Game 6, he was hitting some of those. It was mostly the Terrence Mann game, but Paul George stepped up. He was good in Game 1. He was excellent down the stretch of Game 2. Really good Game 3. Wasn't there in Game 4. 5 for 20 from the field. That's even in a game like this, 5 for 20 is pretty bad. That's pretty bad. So, yes, he was forcing a lot of shots. I will go to a quote that Ty Lue used. Ty Lue, head coach of the Clippers. He said, the Clippers coming back from down 3-1 is doable. It's doable. Coming back from 3-1. Only 13 teams in the history of the NBA has done it. Only, I think, 4 teams, if I'm not mistaken, in the conference finals have done it. The most recent being my Golden State Warriors coming back from 3-1 in OKC back in 2016. And I'm here to tell you the Los Angeles Clippers are going to be the 14th team. Yes, you heard me right. The Los Angeles Clippers are coming back from 3-1 down. Why? First of all, both teams are gassed. Now, how does that benefit the LA Clippers? Well, now nobody expects anything from Paul George. Because once again, he misses those free throws at the end of Game 2. Well, he's going to choke again in Game 3. Oh, no, he stepped up. He was the best player on the floor. Oh. Saturday night, excuse me, missing free throws, missing shots. Everybody thinks the series is over. It's done. It's over tonight. Game 5. Phoenix going to close it out at home. Now, that is a tough place to win. Phoenix, how long has it been since they've lost a home game? I think the only home game they've lost in the playoffs was Game 2 of the first round against the Lakers. That's it. They've won every other game at home besides that. We know Chris Paul has a history of being down 3-1, and I love Chris Paul. We know what he does down 3-1. It ain't great. And he's not 100%. Booker's not 100%. That's why the contributions of Ayton has been excellent. You look on the Clippers side. Ty Lue's been down 3-1 before. He's been down 3-1 against the 73-9 Warriors. He had LeBron James. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. This is a deep Clippers team. And it's something else. The playoffs have made no sense. These playoffs have made no sense. If you would have told me 2 months out, like in March, the playoffs started in mid-May. We're almost in July. The playoffs starting in the middle to end of May. If you would have told me at the All-Star break, the Atlanta Hawks are going to be in the conference finals, and the Nets and Lakers will not get past the second round, I'd have said, you, my friend, are crazy. But here we are. If you'd have told me that Kawhi Leonard's going to get injured right in the middle of the series against the one-seeded Jazz, and Paul George is going to step up and be the best player in the series, I said, do you watch basketball? Have you watched these last few playoffs? Something else. And maybe this has been the downfall of the Clippers. We've talked about it all year. Close games. They have not been good in close games. They were the second worst team in all of basketball in what they call clutch time minutes. What is that? Last 2 minutes of a game when the score is within 5 points. The Clippers were the second worst team in basketball, only to the Houston Rockets, who had the worst record in basketball and had the second overall pick in the draft. They were in that category. The Clippers were. Here's what they got to realize. We got to get out to the gates firing. We got to get out to a big lead because they were playing from behind in game 1. Game 2, same thing. Game 3, they got out to a great start. Third quarter kind of took over, and they closed it in the fourth with a comfortable lead. Game 4, the whole game they were playing catch-up. As close as it was, as unbelievable as this is, Phoenix won wire to wire. They never trailed. They never trailed in Game 4. They won wire to wire. Even when the Clippers cut it to 1 and it was 71-70, there was a, 5-minute or whatever it was, scoring drought. Are you kidding me? In 2021, you tell me there's a 5-minute scoring drought? It's crazy. But once again, these playoffs have made no sense. They made no sense. So why not I predict something that would make no sense? The team that blew a 3-1 lead last year to the Denver Nuggets when they had a 16-point lead in Game 5, a 19-point lead in Game 6, and a 12-point lead in Game 7, comes back a year later against the higher-seeded team and comes back from 3-1 down. Am I crazy? Probably. Probably. But I just have a feeling. Atlanta was not supposed to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. Brooklyn was supposed to get past the second round. The Lakers were definitely supposed to get past the first round. The Clippers should have been dead in the water when Kawhi Leonard got hurt. And here we are. It has been a wacko playoff run in 2021. It would only make sense for the Clippers to make the wackiest comeback of all. Down 3-1 against a guy in Chris Paul. Love Chris Paul. I think if he wins a championship this year, there's definitely a good possibility of that, I think he's the 5th best point guard ever if he wins a championship. Heck, he might already be. But he's been up 3-1 before on the Houston Rockets back in 2015. And it didn't turn out too well for the Clippers. Was that Chris Paul? Was it the Clippers? Who knows? Who knows back in 2015? But we're talking about a coach in Ty Lue. When he was down 3-1, people forget this. People give LeBron a ton of credit, which he deserves. When the Cavs were down 3-1 to Golden State, 2016, as a Warriors fan, it still hurts me to this day, but it is what it is. It happens. LeBron, 41 points in games 5 and 6, and a 27-point triple-double in game 7, including the most iconic block in NBA history. Kyrie Irving, along with LeBron, dropped 41 in game 5, had another big game in game 6, and hit, in my view, the third clutchest shot in NBA history in Game 7. Those two dudes showed up. And yet other guys, Kevin Love played great defense, although he was a liability offensively. Tristan Thompson played the best series of his life. Richard Jefferson, Amon Shumpert played great defense. Like, these guys stepped up. But Ty Lue made the adjustments. And that's what he's done this entire playoff run for the Clippers. He's pushed all the right buttons. Keep in mind, Clippers were down 0-2 and won 4 straight on the Jazz, including a road win in Game 5. Now, the Clippers will have to do that twice. They'll have to do that twice. But as Ty Lue said, it's doable. It is not impossible. It is not impossible. They are not facing a super team. They're not facing the Warriors of 2017 or the Heat of 2013 or the Shaq Kobe Lakers. Phoenix is a great basketball team. I just have a feeling their season will come to an end on, Friday. Game 5 tonight will go to the Clippers, as will definitely, if they win Game 5, this is going to a Game 7. If the Clippers win tonight, it's going to Game 7. I'm just here to tell you. So, Phoenix, if you want to close this series out, you better do it tonight. You better, because if you give them any life, and knowing your most valuable player, knowing he's been in the spot like, uh-oh, I've been here before. I've never been to the finals. I've been in this position. Championship coach, a guy in Paul George who, while once again, he was not good. He was bad in Game 4. Now there's no expectations for Game 5. I mean, everybody. I checked every net, ESPN, Fox Sports. Everybody thinks the series is over tonight. And they very well could be right. Why? I mean, come on. The Suns are up 3-1. They're at home. They've only lost one home game the entire postseason, and that was back in the first round in Game 2. Why on earth should they come back or blow a 3-1 lead, Because the playoffs have made no sense. Any other, if this was 2019, 18, 17, 16, keep going back, I'd say, yeah, it's over. But because these playoffs have made not an ounce of sense, Clips in 7. And I don't like the Clippers, by the way. I'm a Warriors fan. I don't like the Clippers. I don't want them to win the championship. But I just have a feeling Ty Lue's been here before on the Clippers side. He's come back from 3-1. He's made the adjustments necessary. And Chris Paul has been up 3-1. And it didn't end pretty back in 2015. I'm going to leave it at that. Sticking with the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard, obviously the best player on the team. He's, of course, out for most. I mean, I would be stunned if he comes back. Knowing back how the situation in 2017, 2018 played out, where he had the knee injury, and the Spurs were rushing him to come back because they wanted to try and make a championship run because they got into the Western Conference Finals in 2017. But Kawhi got hurt, so like, man, let's run it back. Maybe a little shot at the Warriors. And Kawhi only played 9 games that season. He was taking care of his health. Ain't nobody rushing Kawhi Leonard back. Nobody. He's done. He's done for this season. So a report comes out. I saw this the other day. A report came out from Dan Feldman, good source, that says there's a rumor that Kawhi Leonard is unhappy with the Clippers medical staff. And all I got to say is this to Kawhi Leonard. With all due respect, you're a great player. You're a future Hall of Famer. 2-time champ, 2-time Finals MVP, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, although both should have went to Draymond Green, but we'll leave that there. Great player. You got to look yourself in the mirror. Because back in San Antonio, from day one, from his rookie year, he had injuries. His body is not meant to take an entire NBA season. So he doesn't trust the Spurs medical staff, which I don't blame him, by the way. I don't blame him for not trusting the Spurs medical staff. He goes to Toronto. More knee issues, tendonitis. He gets hurt. He goes to the Clippers. He's hurt again. This is a recurring theme with Kawhi Leonard. He's great. You don't know if he's always going to be available. By the way, he's a top 3 performer in the playoffs that we have in the league. He is. I could argue it's LeBron and then Kawhi. as far as current playoff performance, great playoff performance we have in the NBA today. He is great in the playoffs. More times than not, save for last year when they blew a 3-1 lead to Denver, anytime his team has lost, usually it hasn't been because he hasn't showed up. That's normally been the case outside of last year. But again, he needs to look himself in the mirror. Because it can't just be, I don't trust the Clippers medical staff. I haven't heard that from anybody else. Spurs didn't trust him because he had a bunch of injuries. Okay, go to Toronto, had injuries there. Go to Clippers, have injuries there. Eventually it's got to be on you. Who's the common denominator? Who's the common denominator? And you say, well, he trusted the Raptors medical staff. Well, he was only there 1 year. He didn't really have time to build a distrust of the medical staff. He's already in year 2 with the Clippers and doesn't trust them. Does he leave because of this? Maybe. And if so, the Clippers' already thin championship window is shut. It's gone. Don't know what they do with Paul George at that point. Maybe they try to team up another superstar with him. Maybe that's what they try to do. But if Kawhi leaves the Clippers, their championship bubble has popped. But my question is, if he goes to, say, let me throw out a team out here. Let's say he goes to Boston, just for the sake of argument. He goes to Boston, he teams up with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, 2 young star players. Jason Tatum, a superstar. Will he build a distrust with the Celtics medical staff? I mean, this has been a recurring theme. He's a great player, but he gets hurt a lot, consistently. So I just, when I see this, I'm like, I don't know why there's the distrust there. They're not rushing him back. Matter of fact, right off the bat, they said it might be an ACL. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We have no idea. The general public, we have no idea what Kawhi Leonard's status as far as what the injury is right now. But when it comes down to it, he's been in this position a lot. And you can't tell me, well, he didn't trust the Spurs medical staff, and the Raptors was not, the greatest in the world, and he doesn't trust the Clippers medical staff. I mean, it's eventually he's got to look himself in the mirror and say, this might be on me. This might be on the man in the mirror. So he's great. He is. But I just saw that and I'm like, I don't know what the issue is. I don't know why he's making this point. So let me shift now to Damian Lillard. As I said on Thursday's show, and I've said it more than once here, he's the second best point guard in all of basketball to a guy who I believe is the second greatest point guard of all time, Steph Curry. So that's, if Steph isn't in the league, Dame is the best player or best point guard. Gives you 30 pretty consistently every night. Can shoot the lights out. Is arguably the clutchest player we have in the league today. One of the clutchest players ever. He's got 2 series-ending buzzer-beating shots. A lot of guys got buzzer beaters in the playoffs. Dame's got not 1 but 2 series-ending. Like, he hit a shot at the buzzer to end the series, to advance Portland to the second round in both instances, back in 2014 and back in 2019 against the Rockets and Thunder, respectively. And both were threes. Like that's who Dame is. It's Dame time, right? He's got the celebration. It's Dame time. He's a great player. And what has been the thing that stood in his way? Didn't have enough help in Portland. Because Portland is a small market. In order to build a team, you got to draft or win a lot of trades, and that's not been the Blazers. They've got a good team. They've got a good team, right? CJ McCollum's a very, very good player. Carmelo is obviously not in his prime, but hey, he can still score. You got guys like Yusuf Nurkic and Enes Kanter, Norman Powell they traded for. It's a good basketball team, but it has never been a championship team. Even when they got to the Western Conference Finals back in 2019, nobody thought they were beating Golden State, and they got swept. So we're starting to hear, we saw Dame with the Instagram post after the Blazers got eliminated in 6 games by the Nuggets in the first round. We saw the post on IG. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was quoting Nipsey Hussle, basically saying, how much longer can I do this? in this destination. And, I'd say that compounded when he saw Denver beat us in 6 and then got swept off the floor by the Phoenix Suns in the second round. So we got beat in the first round by a team that got swept the very next round. I can't win here. And according to Chris Haynes, which you won't find many sources better than Chris Haynes, he reports that Damian Lillard may request a trade and that the enormous backlash from the Blazers organization, from their process to hire a new head coach, which, by the way, we found out is Chauncey Billups. Love the hire. I love Chauncey. I think he's going to be an excellent coach in the NBA. But the enormous backlash from the Portland Trail Blazers process to hire a new coach and his concerns on whether a championship contender can be built have become the factors that may push Damian Lillard out the door, per Chris Haynes. So he's probably gone. He's probably going to request a trade out of Portland. He has a no-trade clause, so he can determine where he wants to go. He can tell the Blazers, trade me here. And they really don't have a choice. So, first of all, good on Dame. And it's not I don't want to knock the Blazers because they really are a well-run organization. They're not the Knicks. Even though the Knicks have a good team, James Dolan's a clown. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's a clown. And I don't use that term loosely, but he's the worst owner in sports. It's not the Knicks who are dysfunctional, or it's not the Thunder. The Thunder, while they're tanking right now, they're getting draft picks. I don't know if there's a general manager better than Sam Presti. He is the best. He drafted Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden 3 straight years. I mean, that's incredible. And, even last year with Chris Paul and a bunch of kids, they got to the playoffs. Now, I think that was more on Chris and his impact on winning more than it was Sam Presti, but they still got to the playoffs, and he's an excellent general manager. Portland is not a dysfunctional organization, but it's part of being a small market. That's the crappy thing about being a small market. Free agents don't want to go there. They want to go to LA. They want to go to San Francisco. They want to go to Miami, New York, Brooklyn, probably more specifically than New York. To any of the teams in Texas. Like, they don't really, when free agents don't think, oh yeah, Portland. Like, it would take the Blazers being a championship contending team. Like, Phoenix is now just getting the free agent buzz. It's because they're winning. It's because they're like the Lakers for years. After Kobe tore his Achilles back in 2013, they missed the playoffs. What was it? 7 straight years, I think it was. 6 straight years, 7, something like that. And some of those years, they were awful. They were awful. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Kobe's last year, they won like 17 games. They were horrible. They were, just awful. But who did they land 3 years after Kobe's, it was actually 2 years, 2 years after Kobe's retirement, who did they land in free agency? The king himself, LeBron James. It's the Lakers brand. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is in the NBA. I don't think it's as much the case in the NFL, but it's the situation. It's the reality in the NBA for small markets. And Dame's been there for 9 years, and they have not been able to put together a team that we really sit back and think, okay, this Blazers team can win a championship. We've never thought that for the last 9 years. It's just not been the reality of the Blazers. And so I look at the situation for Dame, and I think off the top of my head, what about Boston? What about the Knicks? The 2 big market teams, out east. Something else that hurts Dame a little bit is not only is Portland a small market, but it's out west. Like, their games start at 10 o'clock. Even if you're the type that stays up till, if you're on the East Coast like me, if you stay up till, a little bit past midnight watching some of these basketball games, you're going to watch the Laker game or even the Clipper game or the Warrior game over the Blazers game. Like, it's the bigger brands. It's, they've got a lot of championships. Not the Clippers, but the Lakers and Warriors, they got a lot of championships. Like, if he goes to New York, first of all, they're going to get a ton more national TV games. I think they already are this upcoming year, because they made the playoffs and had an excellent season this year. But if they trade for Dame, the buzz at Madison Square Garden, Madison Square Garden fell in love with Julius Randle, who's an all-star, who's very good. but he ain't Dame. He is not Dame. Can you imagine Damian Lillard at MSG and just the buzz of the Garden every time he steps on the floor and shoots from the Knicks logo at half court? Man. Are they a championship team if that happens? Doubt it. I don't think Dame and Julius Randle is enough to get the Knicks to a finals. An Eastern Conference Finals, sure. Sure, I think so. You add a superstar like that? Absolutely. As John says, he says it's coming, and he says facts. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. But I just think that's reality. You know, I've heard the Lakers thrown out there too. The Lakers think they're getting every free agent. I swear, Laker Nation think they're going to get every single free agent there is. But I will say this, or even trade for superstars, which you obviously have to do to get Dame. I will say this for the Lakers. I think if you trade AD for Dame, that could possibly happen. And listen, if I'm the Lakers, if I'm Rob Pelinka, and I call the Blazers and say, listen, we want Dame, what do you want? If they say Anthony Davis, along with some other role players, done. I'm doing it. Because as great as AD is, when he is at the top of his game, he's the best big in the league. He's better than Jokic. He's better than Embiid. Even though he's not technically a center, he's listed as a power forward. When he's dominating down low, there's nothing you can do. He's the best big in the league at his best. He's a top 4 or 5 player on the planet at his best. But number one, there's 2 problems. Number one is that, does he always have that mentality? Like that's always been the Anthony Davis criticism, even back to his days in New Orleans. No killer will. That criticism has just been, I guess, put on the bright lights of LA because it's LA. It's the Lakers. There's expectations. And to his credit, he was great in the bubble. At times better than LeBron. At times. When the Lakers won the finals last year. But it was the bubble. It's not Staples Center. It's not going on the road. That's why I say that, they were to an extent bubble frauds, but that's no disrespect to LeBron or any of those guys. But the other problem with AD is he gets hurt a lot. What did Charles Barkley call him? He called him street clothes. Because a lot of time he's in street clothes, It's the same case with Kawhi. Like, you don't always know if he's going to be there when it comes to his health. And in the case of AD, unlike Kawhi, his mentality. Dame, you know what you're getting. He's always healthy. Now, guys get hurt. That happens. Everybody gets hurt. LeBron was the Iron Man of the league for 15 years, and in year 16, he had a groin injury. And then this year, he had an ankle injury. Like, it happens. Everybody gets hurt. But as far as guys that, they're going to be there, they're durable, they're going to play almost every game, Dame's in that category. He's in that category with LeBron, James Harden, guys like that, like Kevin Durant, he's going to be there. Even KD has had injuries. Steph has a lot of injuries. So, Dame's going to be there. And his mentality is going to be there. He's going to be there physically. So a tandem of LeBron and Dame, I would do it in a heartbeat. It fixed your point guard issue. Now, you would be without a big, but you could replace that. It's a 3-point shooting lead more than ever now. I think the Lakers' inability to shoot was part of their downfall this year. It was part of why I thought if there was no bubble last year, they wouldn't have won the championship. I think that all factors in. So, if the Lakers want to trade, if the Lakers don't want to trade AD for Dame, I think they'd be making a mistake. I really do. Because I think this is a once-in-a-generation point guard, scorer, shooter. If the Blazers say, hey, give us AD, done. I'm doing that immediately. But I don't blame him. I think something else that should be mentioned is that he's going to be playing in the Olympics this year. He's going to be the guy. He's going to be the number 1 point guard. Steph's not going to play there. LeBron's not going to be there. Now, KD's the best player without a doubt. He's the best player in the world, but he's obviously going to be the best player on Team USA with the Olympics this summer. But Dame's going to be the point guard. He's going to be the point guard. He'll be taking shots from, they call him Logo Lillard. He'll be taking shots from half court. That's what he does. He knocks them down. And he's going to be playing with some of the best players on earth. And then he'll go back to Portland and be like, man, this ain't it. What did LeBron, you remember LeBron in 2008? When, the Cavs could not get him a second star. They just couldn't. He was just dragging that Cleveland team to the playoffs year in and year out, winning, MVP after MVP. And he goes to the Olympics in 2008, and he's with Dwayne Wade, he's with Kobe Bryant, and he's with Carmelo, and he's with Chris Bosh. He's like, oh, snap. This is, wow, I can play with some of the best players in the world. And what happened 2 years later? The decision. I'm going to be taking my talents to South Beach. Teamed up with D. Wade. Chris Bosh hopped along for the ride. And, of course, the rest, as they say, is history. They won 2 championships in 4 years as the Heatles. So I think playing the Olympics will contribute that much more to Dame not wanting to stay in Portland. I do think the hiring of Chauncey Billups is great. I think Chauncey Billups is going to be an excellent coach in the league. I really do. He's well respected. He's been interviewed for front office roles. Like that says a lot about him and how much people in the league have respect for him. He's a new head coach in Portland. Will Dame be there? My guess is no, especially after he plays in the Olympics. I think Dame will be on a different team. I personally would like to see him go to the Knicks. I think that would be that'd be, you want to talk about the spectacle of MSG and, that would be just great. The thing about Madison Square Garden is if you're a great player, whether you're a Knick player, which has not been the case for years, but if you're the best player on the floor, whether you're on the Knicks or on the opposition, they'll root for you. They want to see you. They want to see you give them a show. New York is the entertainment capital of America, right? People want to see. It's the number one media market. People want you to give them a good show. And we know that Damian Lillard is more than capable of doing that. So I would love to see him go to New York. I don't think they'd be contenders. That's the only issue, unless they got another star alongside him. It's all possible. It's all possible. We've seen some crazy trades and some crazy free agent signings over the last 4 or 5 years or so, and wouldn't rule it out. So last topic, goodness gracious. Scottie Pippen. 6-time champion, one of the 50 greatest players ever. Obviously was known by some as the greatest Robin in NBA history, the greatest sidekick to a dynasty in NBA history. Like the difference, like in Scottie and like, say, for example, the Warriors dynasty. Like Steph was the second best player to KD, but it was 1A and 1B. Like Steph's a 2-time MVP. Like he's not Robin. He's just 1B. KD's 1A, he's the better player, but Steph's 1B. Shaq and Kobe. At that time, Shaq was the better player. Shaq's the most dominant player in the history of the game, at least in the modern era. He was the better player, but this is Kobe Bryant we're talking about. He was 1B. He wasn't Robin. He was 1B. Scottie was Robin to Jordan's Batman. And I think we are starting to see a side of Scottie that I didn't know was there. He's got a book coming out this fall. Don't know if I'll read it. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Depending on whether it'll give us some good topics. Because keep in mind, the NFL season gives us plenty of those. It's obviously Major League Baseball end of season in October. That'll give us plenty of storylines as well. So what I'm looking at with Scottie Pippen. So first of all, he comes out. There's an excerpt from the book that gets put out, I think, by his agent or by the publishing company, where it's talking about how Scottie was the driving force of the Bulls dynasty. Does anybody on earth think Scottie Pippen was the driving force of the Bulls dynasty? No. Just for context, not like anybody needs to be reminded of this, but Michael Jordan inherited a team when he was drafted at 3rd overall out of North Carolina in 1984. Michael Jordan inherited a team that was not just bad, that was not just not known for basketball. Folks, they were called the Traveling Cocaine Circus. They were more known for smoking dope than winning basketball games. That's what Jordan inherited. Scottie came along, and there was Jordan. Right? There was Doug Collins. There was a solid Bulls team. Like at that time, they weren't a contender yet, but they were getting the playoffs. They were winning the playoff games. Jordan was was showing the world that he was the greatest player ever, right? And so Scotty says he was the driving force. And then we talked about, I talked about it last week on Thursday and Friday about how he said he's bashing Kevin Durant and saying, he's not a team player. And KD comes back at him and says, Scott, he calls him Scott, not Scotty. KD responds, he says, Scott, weren't you the guy, I'm paraphrasing here, but weren't you the guy who your first year without Michael Jordan at the end of a playoff game, there's a few seconds left, Bulls are down, Phil Jackson, the greatest coach of all time, draws up a play for Tony Kukoc instead of you, and you refuse to go into the basketball game? You sit and pout on the bench? Wasn't that you? And that leads us to the latest edition. That very story leads us to the latest edition of where Scotty has went crazy. I guess we'll call it, we may do segments like that, where Scotty has went crazy. I'll cut to the chase. Scottie Pippen was on the Dan Patrick Show earlier today. Love Dan Patrick. So it's one of my favorite morning radio shows to listen to. But Scotty was on the Dan Patrick Show earlier this morning. And Dan was asking Scotty about that very situation. 1994 it was. It's the second round against the Knicks. If I'm not mistaken, it was game 4. It was game 3 or game 4 of that series. It was a must-win for the Bulls. They were in a situation, if they lost that, they were not coming back either down 3-0 or 3-1 against the Knicks. And it was their first year without Jordan. He'd gone to play baseball, and Scotty had a great year. He might have finished like top 5 in MVP voting, too. He was excellent. Bulls won 54 games. Some thought, hey, they might get back to the finals without Michael Jordan. And they're playing the New York Knicks in the second round. And it's late in the game. This is at home in Chicago at the United Center. And Phil Jackson calls timeout. They're down and draws up a play for Tony Kukoc, who at that time was a rookie, instead of Scottie Pippen. Because of that, Scott sat on the bench and pouted. He sat on the bench, and Phil, in the last dance they were talking about, Phil Jackson said, "You not going in?" Scotty didn't respond, and I'll keep this clean, keep this PG. He said, "Oh, okay, forget you." And I can't remember who he put in the game after that. Might have put like Bill Winnington or something in. And so Scotty quit on the team. Dan Patrick asked him about that situation. You know what Scotty said? He said that I can't believe this is coming out of this man's mouth. He said Phil Jackson was racist for letting Kukoc take the last shot instead of Pippen. Now listen, we've talked about, certainly going back to last year during, after George Floyd was killed. We've talked many times about racism and its horrible effects on people of all races, the Black community, Asian American community, many others, Latino community. And racism is the biggest evil that this country has. It's a deep, deep thing. Deep. And so for Scottie Pippen to come out here and say, because Phil Jackson did not give me the last shot, he's a racist? What? Like, that don't even make sense. Like, because I didn't get the last... Kukoc was the better shooter. Kukoc was one of the best European players ever. He was like a lesser version. He's like the poor man's Dirk. He was like the poor man's Dirk Nowitzki. That's kind of what Tony Kukoc was. Of course, Phil Jackson's going to give the ball to the best shooter. Duh. Scotty couldn't shoot. I don't even know why this is even a topic. And so I get it. He's putting this book out, but man, like this is the stuff that you're using to sell. Saying Kevin Durant's not a team player. Saying you were the driving force of the Bulls dynasty. And saying that Phil Jackson was a racist for not giving you the last shot against the Knicks? What? Listen, we've seen instances, even in sports, just in sports alone, of racism. That was not it. I mean, come on now. I mean, listen, that is just, it's an insult to those who have experienced the horrible effects of racism in this country and anywhere in general. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, come on, man. Come on, Scotty. Like he may say something else that we'll be talking about in the show on Thursday. Who knows? And so until then, that is all the time we have for today's show. Thank y'all so much for stopping by, listening. Again, big thank you to the happy birthday wishes, for the happy birthday wishes. Really appreciate that. I guess legally this is my first show as an adult, so I guess that's that. So hope everybody's a great week. I'm calling it right now. Clippers come back down 3-1. If they're not, you might want to be on IG tonight. I'll just say that. But hope everybody has a great evening. Continue to stay safe. Catch us on Thursday, as always, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. God bless you all. Peace out.